What's up guys, Mickle here, and one of the most ironic things about the current regulatory landscape in cryptocurrencies is there always seemed to be some inherent belief that Ethereum was definitely not a security, but tokens like XRP might be. In this video, I want to show you some brand new evidence that's going to make it clear that that is so far from the truth, and if anything, XRP is so much less of a security than Ethereum ever has been in its existence. I also want to talk about whether or not I think this current Ripple SEC case is going to go to the Supreme Court. We have seen a lot of discussions recently centered around what happens once this current case we're watching right now finishes up. Are we going to the Supreme Court? I want to give you my perspective on that, as well as break down the XRP price chart at the end of this video, go over what is finally going to make us break out of the range we've been stuck in. Make sure to stick around for that. You are not going to want to miss it. Like always, guys, make sure to subscribe to this channel. It really does help me out. And if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out the link in the description of this video. With that said though, let's jump right into it right after a quick word from the sponsor of this video.
Void.
So I want to start off this video and go over a very interesting observation made by Stephen Hubert, and this is around what makes something a security and what makes something not a security. Now, this is a very confusing issue in the cryptocurrency industry, like many of you know, but it's really because of the SEC. The SEC came out a while ago under Jay Clayton and said every single ICO is a security. Now, this actually made a lot of sense, and it was something I agreed with. It really did make sense that if you were going to be raising money from investors before your token existed, that was likely a security, and ICOs really generally did look like securities. This is something I was on board with, and I didn't see anything wrong with this logic. Well, it started to get confusing when the SEC came out of nowhere and said Ethereum, a token that was an ICO, was not a security, and a token like XRP, where there was no ICO, was a security. Now, this is when the SEC's logic really started to fall apart, because they directly contradicted the one rule, the one piece of clarity they put out into the market. Ever since then, there has been absolutely no clarity in this market, and the one thing the SEC said no longer made any sense. Well, Stephen Hubert makes a very interesting point here about how XRP really was never a security, even in the early days. And what he points to is the fact that when XRP was actually first created, it actually traded without a price. It was completely free for over a year. Now, this is very interesting because one of the main things that makes something an investment contract is whether or not you are putting in money and expecting a profit. Because XRP did not have a price for over a year, and this is actually something I'm just learning right now. I knew it didn't have a price for a while, but I had no idea that that period actually lasted for more than a year. Well, that borderline makes it impossible for it to have been an investment contract even in the early days. I mean, it really just shows that at the end of the day, XRP is just software with a value attached to it. And that's kind of a confusing statement, but I think it really gets to the point that it really only matters how you sell a token off the initial sale. I mean, the token itself can't really be a security. It doesn't make sense, and that's something we have talked about at length. The only thing really up in the air at this point is how the token was initially sold. Now, what we're learning right here is that XRP was actually trading with no value for over a year. So even when XRP was originally on the market, it wasn't being sold as a security. Compare that to something like Ethereum, which was originally sold at a value before it even existed. This is almost the definition of a security, and the SEC literally admitted that. Now, I'm not someone who thinks Ethereum is a security. There are people out there who think that. I personally think that Ethereum is not a security, but it was sold as a security at one point. At the end of the day, the SEC doesn't want to acknowledge this argument because they just want to call it all securities because that means they have more under their jurisdiction. Either way though, this just shows that since day one, the SEC has been so out of line with their argument and they have never had the facts on their side. I think it's so interesting that we find evidence like this that hasn't even showed up in the Ripple SEC case, and it just further proves that the SEC has been wrong this entire time. Now, with that said, as XRP holders, we are extremely close to getting the clarity we have been begging for years now, and we are going to be the first cryptocurrency community out there to have that clarity. Ultimately, I really do hope this decision in the Ripple SEC case is going to make it more clear to every single project out there that the token itself is not the security, it's the initial sale. But until this case ends, we're just going to have no idea where that issue ends up. Now, I want to move on and quickly talk about the Voyager, Binance, SEC debacle going on right now. And I don't really want to cover the case in detail too much, but we're learning something very interesting here that needs to be pointed out. One of Gary Gensler's MOs since he got to the SEC is that there is a ton of clarity in the market right now, and it's all a security. You just have to look at these rules that were written 80 years ago, and you'll come to a very clear understanding that, you know what, this all really is clear and obvious. Well, the judge in the Voyager versus SEC case is making it extremely clear that none of this is under the SEC's jurisdiction. He is literally coming out and directly telling the SEC that they haven't made anything clear, so that the insinuation that it's all a security is completely bogus. Now, I'm not going to read the actual court document here, but this guy, Bill Hughes, actually did a little bit of his own version of what the judge and what the SEC were saying here, and I'm just going to read it to you because for all intents and purposes, this is pretty accurate. Judge, you're being vague. SEC, we'll tell you what we think privately. Judge, say it publicly. SEC, fine. The staff thinks Voyager token is a security and Binance US is a 1934 Act exchange, but the commission hasn't said anything formal, so reject the plan for Binance to buy Voyager. Judge, yeah, nope, none of this is clear. The judge is directly pushing back here against the SEC's theory that they can just come into any situation, make up rules arbitrarily, and say, you know what, this is all under our jurisdiction, even though we haven't told that to the public yet. The reason why this is so important is because this could actually be used in the Ripple SEC case. This is a judge formally agreeing with the cryptocurrency community in court that the SEC has not provided clear guidance to any sector of this industry. This is directly against what Gary Gensler has been saying and just shows that everything right now is so up in the air. The SEC completely rushed their case against Ripple and is going to backfire big time against them. Not only is the SEC on the wrong side of the law here, but they never gave Ripple the guidance to understand that the SEC thought XRP was a security. This pretty much absolutely sunk their case from the day it was filed, and I've talked to a lot of different lawyers out there, and they are all in agreement that the SEC's case has developed into a significantly weaker case than they ever thought it would. And on that note, I want to move on and talk about whether or not I think this case is going to go to the Supreme Court. I know this is an issue on a lot of people's minds, and it's a little nuanced, so I want to break down two important points here. I really do think that if Ripple loses this case and gets some devastating outcome, which I don't think is going to happen, I think Ripple will no doubt take it to the Supreme Court. They have nothing to lose at that point. Of course, they would go to the Supreme Court. The more interesting argument I want to make here, and I think this is kind of against consensus, I want to talk about why I don't think the SEC would take this to the Supreme Court. Well, I already told you 1 second ago that many lawyers out there think the SEC's case is a lot weaker than they expected. The SEC also didn't bring a lot of evidence to this case that might have made it stronger. There's been things pointed out by the XRP community I don't want to get into that the SEC completely omitted, and it would have likely made their case a little stronger. Lawyers were actually shocked some of the stuff the SEC left out. Well, on top of that, and John Deaton was reporting this the other day, the SEC has 200 to 300 more crypto cases lined up. Guys, The SEC is losing against Ripple big time. The SEC needs some crypto wins. It doesn't really make sense for the SEC to drag out the Ripple case longer because they're going to be wasting so much time and resources just delaying their inevitable loss. Not only that, but we already talked about how the SEC losing this current case could create a precedent for the industry. Well, guys, it is 10x worse for the SEC if they lose at the Supreme Court level. That would in no doubt give the entire industry guidance and would be a huge loss for the SEC. Me personally, I don't think that's a risk the SEC is going to take. The reason they're lining up 200 to 300 more crypto cases is because they're ready to move on from this Ripple case. It hasn't gone well. And at the end of the day, this Ripple case is not Gary Gensler's baby. It was Jay Clayton's case. For all we know, Gary Gensler might just be letting it play out, and he might be ecstatic to get himself out of this. For all Gary Gensler's faults, he is not a dumb guy. And I am absolutely convinced he is fully aware that this case is not going well for the SEC. It doesn't make a lot of sense for me that Gary Gensler would prolong this entire event. The XRP community is being heard loud and clear by everyone that they are not happy with what the SEC is doing, and the SEC is exposing themselves with such a bad case. Our pushback wouldn't matter if the SEC was winning big. Our pushback would mean nothing if Ripple was doing a bunch of sketchy stuff on the back end. But at the end of the day, the SEC sued one of the most transparent companies in the entire crypto industry that was always trying to be on the right side of the law. This is backfiring big time for the SEC, and I just don't see them taking this to the Supreme Court. The one caveat I will give them is that if the SEC is really just set on punishing Ripple and trying to hurt them as much as possible, maybe out of spite they could take it to the Supreme Court, but ultimately I just don't think that's a risk the SEC is going to be willing to take. And I want to finish this video off and quickly talk about the XRP price chart. It is wild. XRP is still bouncing around this range. I like these time bars up here. They really show you how long XRP has been consolidating. We are still in this range. Nothing exciting has happened yet, but I saw XRP Captain put out a pretty funny tweet of this same chart with Judge Torres' decision right around the corner. I really do think this is going to be the catalyst to break us out of this trading range. Now, obviously, we don't know when this decision is going to happen. I expected we would already have this decision. I think a lot of lawyers in this community also thought this decision would have already happened, but once Judge Torres gives us clarity on XRP, which I do think is going to happen from this case, it is going to open the floodgates for every single regulated traditional financial player to come into XRP with clarity, understanding they are not violating any securities laws, and that is such a massive catalyst for XRP that no other token is going to have. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out, and happy St. Patrick's Day.